I was going through the presentation that we did a couple of days ago, one of the things that I talked about was starting with why. So let's talk about why Valet. Why did we do this? First of all, in the United States, like I said, there's over 38 million dots that have already been sold. And there are people, when our installers, our integrators are going in and talking to customers, quite oftentimes they're being asked, one of the first things they're being asked is, can you figure out a way to be able to integrate Alexa into my system? So we're dealing with a technology that here, like I said, has already had a major foothold. And so that's the situation we stand in right now. Now, the challenge, of course, is that this little $50 piece sells for 50 bucks here in the US. We get them on sale all the time at $30. There's no way to make money with that. So the entire concept behind the Valet was to give you an opportunity to make money using this ubiquitous technology that's going to begin to spread throughout customers all over Australia. That's really what we're after. And of course, to improve the experience of what the Dot is by itself. The Dot itself is, like I said, it's a simple little device. It's got a speaker in it about the quality of your smartphone, and therefore, as a toy, it works out great. We turn this into a true custom installed voice controlled audio system. That's what this is all about. So first of all, we're going to enhance the music experience in the home because of the fact that the Valet not only will allow you to be able to amplify the individual dots, but you can create a multi-room, multi-source version of this audio system by doing so. It is incredibly simple. It's easy to explain, easy to design, easy to install, and easy to use. That's one of the things that comes up again and again and again, because we describe it to someone, and again, it's a new concept for them. They see it for the first time, and they go, I don't know if I really want another learning curve. But once I put it in their hands, the first response I get is, I had no idea it would be this simple to put together. Okay? And again, we're taking advantage of this voice control mentality. This is growing exponentially, whether it be through the Echo Dot or any other number of voice controlled technologies. They just started running commercials here in the United States for the new OLED TVs from LG that are all in that voice controlled category. So that's important. And because of the fact that you are able to sell amplification and speakers, it's a great profit opportunity as well. Also, the ability to be able to add multiple valets into a home and stack them and create essentially an unlimited size system out of it. You have the opportunity, as people get used to using it, to adding to that system as you move forward. Now, as I mentioned, we are concentrating on it, and I want to concentrate on it today, not as a home automation product, but specifically as a music distribution product. It is 4 stereo zones, 50 watts per channel into 8 channels. So 4 stereo zones, that's a single box. You can select the individual source or the streaming service per zone in each individual room. So you have the ability to be able to play one source in one room and one source in another room. Now, currently in the US, this is what we have: Spotify, Pandora, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Sirius XM, Deezer, and Amazon Music. In Australia, can you give me an idea? Do you know right now which of the streaming services are available on the Echo Dot?
Spotify is, and that's by far the biggest here in Australia, and TuneIn and Amazon Music.
Okay, so those are available. Don't be surprised if more companies come to take advantage of that. Now, if someone is going to use Spotify and they're going to use multiple streams in their home, they're going to need to be able, or they're going to need to have a family plan in order to make that happen, because you have one dot attached to that. You have one dot attached to that. Now, you can take one dot and you can group it to all the other dots and have the same source play throughout all of the rooms at the same time. But if you want individual sources in individual rooms or individual channels, individual playlists or whatever playing from Spotify, they'll need to have a family account so they can assign a different identification to each one of those zones. So on top of the dot, you've got these external sources. You've got inputs for the individual zone, if you'd like to use it, another source for that independent zone. You also have global inputs that you can select. It's a select, a set and forget kind of concept on the back of the unit. So it chooses either the global input or the individual zone input. And then you have the patented automated muting and switching for the dot to the external source. Anytime the dot is active, then it will default to the dot. The minute the dot is not active, that means it's not playing music and you're not interacting with it and Alexa is not talking back. At that point, it will automatically switch over to the external source. So, and of course, the audio improvement goes without saying. As I mentioned a couple of days ago, when you listen to just Alexa talk back through high fidelity loudspeakers, it completely changes the experience. So that's the case. Then, of course, we also give you the opportunity to mount the dot and make it disappear. You use this insert that goes into one of our standard bayonet rings. The dot goes into that, the grill goes over the top, and you end up with the /ability to hide the dot behind this grill up in the ceiling. Now, hidden behind that, we can do it in one of three sizes. You can do it in either the 5-inch, the 6/8-inch, and the 10-inch version. So if you want to match the speakers in the room, I can't make it fit into the 3-inch because the dot's just too large and we can't make that happen. But the 5-inch, the 6/8-inch, and the 10-inch, it'll fit in. And then this isn't actually in June, probably in July, we will have the wall mount version, which is going to be very valuable because there's a lot of people that have keypads in the wall that use a Cat5 connection. With that, you'll be able to replace the keypad with a dot and all your wiring is done. If you've already got speakers mounted in that room, literally all you're gonna have to do is connect the dot on one side and change the amplifier on the other. And that's really what that's about. So let me show you the back of the unit here, so you've got an idea of how this works. I'll use an individual zone because all four of these are identical. So what you've got here is you've got your speaker connection down here, left and right speakers. You can, if you choose to, bridge out of this. I don't recommend it, but we offer it if you wanted to get more power. You, of course, would have to use 2 zones in order to be able to do that, to be able to bridge it out. That would be selected right here in the output mode. 99.9% of the time, you're going to leave it in the stereo 4-ohm, 8-ohm position. Then you have the RJ45 connection over here, and that's where you plug in Cat5 or Cat6. Cat6 will give you longer run, so we recommend that if you can do it. Then you're going to have your line in. Now again, this is for the source that gives you the ability to take the zone source. So this will be only for this particular zone as an external line in. That's going to be selected here, where you have either a line in, a global analog in, or a global optical in, which I'll show you in just a second. This is the input level for that particular zone, so that you can set it up for the output levels that you're dealing with. Again, if you are using an external source, it has to have volume control. This is not an integrated amplifier, so it is just a wire with gain. So if in fact you're using an external source, it's going to be something like a cable box or a dish network or whatever you're using, your satellite box, that already has a volume control on it, because it's going to pass through whatever volume you feed it. The dot itself can be adjusted simply by telling it, Alexa volume 1, Alexa volume 8. It'll go 1 through 10, so you have that. And then a standard 12-volt trigger. This is going to connect whenever Alexa is active. So whether she's talking or whether she's playing music, this will close. As I mentioned before, you could use that in an application, for example, where they're using the TV sound from that particular room as the input, and you are now triggering a pause that's going to take place on the TV whenever you talk to Alexa. That's something that would be done with whatever control system. You can do that with RTI if you want to make that happen, but that's what that 12-volt trigger is for. Let me show you this section down here. Here we've got, first of all, loop outs for each individual zone. If you want to use this for a subwoofer output, because you're going to put a subwoofer in that room, that works fine. If you want to use it for external amplification because you want more power, you're driving a pair of tower speakers in that particular room, whatever, you have this individual zone out. Next to that, we have our global input, the analog version. And again, this is going to be established either that or the SPDIF optical input for global applications. Perfect in a situation where you want to select that. Now again, each individual zone will have one of these switches that will allow you to set either the analog or the optical global input for that particular zone.
Dave, sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What is a typical application, do you think, for the global input?
We have a lot of people that, for example, one of my favorites is Sonos. People fall in love with their Sonos and they've said, oh, I want that to be in every room. So we give them literally a single Sonos optical input comes off a Sonos Connect, and they use that. And every time the dot is not playing in that particular room, it automatically defaults to that Sonos input. And we have people that do that regularly. Now, we also have people that will set the global input for 2 of the rooms and use an external source for the other 2 rooms. So it just depends. It's just a flexibility there. If you want to use it, you can. If you don't, completely up to you. But it's just a busing option for you, so it gives you more flexibility when you set the system up. I'll show you a layout here and give you an idea of how that works in this application.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Did that make sense? I'm sorry. Did that answer? I'll get more into it when I show you the design layout.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Thanks.
Here we have, I've got a couple of different abilities or options for turning the power on to the unit. I recommend that you don't use the 12-volt trigger or the auto sensing, because if you do, when you bring the system online by feeding some type of signal into it, it is now going to power up, because whenever this shuts off, it also shuts off power to the dots. So if you turn the system on, it's going to take a minute or so for the dot to power cycle and come back online. So I don't recommend you use auto sensing at all. It's available there only because we provide that on all of our amplifiers, and dealers have demanded it, so we do that. Now, the 12-volt trigger, there are some areas or some reasons why that might be useful. If you are in an area that has a lot of blackouts, either lightning strikes or whatever the case may be, here, a 12-volt power supply plugged into an AC outlet, feeding 12 volts to that input right there, means that every time you end up going through a blackout, when the power is restored, it will automatically turn the unit on and cycle the power to the dots. If not, then you have to go to the unit itself and press the manual power button in order to be able to start the unit again. So that's one of the reasons. If you do end up with, again, an area, it could be a remote area, whatever, we have some places in the US where that's a problem, then that's one of the options. Most applications, you leave it on all the time. It literally is going to cost pennies a month to let this thing idle in the background. So that's my recommendation to you there. On the front panel, you've got just a few things. First of all, you've got a series of indicator lights. These flash red when you first turn the unit on, and then they turn blue for standard operation. If one of these is to go red, you would know that there is a short or a fault in one of the lines. Usually that's the case. It's a speaker connection. We also have these 4 reset buttons on here. There's one for each zone. This allows you to power cycle an individual dot. If for whatever reason the dot is not responding in a particular room, it's usually just a matter of cycling the power and it comes back up. We don't want you to have to get behind the unit and unplug power. We don't want you to have to climb up in the ceiling and unplug the dot. So here, any of these 4 buttons, depending on which one is out, press the button, it recycles, and away you go. Now, at the dot in the room, there is going to be a balun. You're going to have one side that's going to go to and from the amplifier. The other side is going to go to and from the dot. The side that goes to and from the amplifier is, again, a standard Cat5, Cat6 cable in an RJ45 connector. That's all it is. The other side has 2 connections. One is USB to micro USB. That is what powers the dot. So it's feeding power from the amplifier out to power the dot. And then the other one is going to be a 3.5 mil jack that is going to take the output, the audio output from the dot, feed it into the balun. The balun will convert it to a balanced line so you can send it a long distance. It'll go back to the amplifier where, of course, it is amplified, sent back out over the speaker connections. So that's the extent of the connections that will happen with the dot in the individual room. Now, let's take a look at a system where you are only using the dot, the Valet, and loudspeakers. In this case, we've got 4 echo dots, one for each one of the rooms, and those are going to be connected to 4 home run Cat5 or Cat6 connections. Then we've got a balun in each room for the power and the audio return. And those are going to operate off the RJ45 in the back of the amplifier itself. That's going to connect into that. So you don't have to convert it with a balun at the other side. The balun is already inside of the unit itself. And then you have 5 pair of speakers, and those are going to be on standard speaker wire. So it would look something like this right here. All the blue dots are dots, the actual dots that are out there. All the orange dots are loudspeakers. You'll notice there's a pair in the owner's suite, a pair in the great room, 2 pair in the dining and kitchen room, which are going to share a single dot, and then 1 pair in the den. So that is an entire basic Valet system. It's going to be connected via Wi-Fi. The dots will be connected via Wi-Fi. They will be receiving the streaming sources, and everything else will operate just as you see right there. In the US, and I don't know what the price is going to be in Australia, but in the US, the suggested retail price of the Valet is $1,500. You now have 4 dots. Let's say you paid full price and they were $50 a piece, so you have $100 or $200 in dots. So we're now at $1,700, and now you've got speakers of choice. The point is that you could do this for $2,000, $3,000, depending on the quality of the speaker, up to maybe $5,000, and you have a full voice-controlled, multi-room, multi-source audio distribution system. There is nothing like this out there. There is nothing that allows this type of simplicity and this type of flexibility and being able to operate a system like this throughout the home. Nothing at this price. Again, it is not for everybody. I'm not trying to steal away business from someone else who's using a much more advanced system, because this is not a tremendously advanced system. It's actually very simplistic. But this allows you to be able to go into homes that would normally not be a target for an individual to do this type of a system, and be able to build upon it or expand upon it as the family grows up with their audio video system in the room. That gives you an idea. Now I'll show you the same system. What we've done here is we added a satellite receiver and an AM radio that just happened to have volume control on it. The only reason this is a real system, the only reason that we added the AM radio is the guy liked to have his talk radio channel that he listened to all the time, and he wanted it playing in his office, which was in his den. And that was going to be where he connected, that's where the AM radio was going to operate. So we had those 2 added, and those are both on individual zone inputs, 3 and 4. The Sonos Connect, as I mentioned before, is plugged into the global input, and the zones 1 and 2 were set to that SPDIF input. So for any of those, the Sonos is now the secondary source for music in the room. Now, we have had a lot of people use just that type of a setup, not necessarily the AM radio, that was kind of unique. But we've had people that do, again, a sat receiver or maybe 2 of those because they have TVs in 2 rooms and they want to share the speakers in the ceiling with the TV and the audio system. They've done that kind of work. So that's where this type of a system would lay out. And this is exactly how it would attach together. Again, the Sonos is into the global input, the sat receiver and the AM radio were both into individual zone inputs in those rooms, and you adjusted the individual zone input here by that input source selector switch on the back of the unit. Now, I talked about Sonos. It's interesting because Sonos has had a huge experience here in the United States. I mean, the fact that they bought a commercial in the middle of the Super Bowl that cost them a couple of $1 million is an indicator of how they have gone about their marketing. However, we can either complement a Sonos system or replace a Sonos system. You realize that the back of a Sonos Connect looks just like this. So you can either take the analog output on it and feed it into a zone input, or you can take the optical output and feed it into the global input and use it as one of the sources. Usually the reason people like Sonos is they like the interface. They're used to bringing out their phone, selecting the app, selecting a playlist, selecting a song, whatever they want to do. Now, don't be surprised. You will have people who use this because they're comfortable with their Sonos system. They will plug it in and they'll set it up, and the dealer will explain that Sonos, it will automatically default to that when you're not using the dot. And somewhere along the way, somebody will walk into the room and they'll say, Alexa, play Beyonce. And all of a sudden, Beyonce will begin playing from their Spotify account. And they will say, wait a minute, I didn't have to pull out my phone. I didn't have to select the app. I didn't have to select a particular song. I didn't have to, I literally just asked for the music and it was there. And I can say, like in Spotify, I could say, play smooth jazz, or I could say, play country hits, or there's so many things you can just ask for, and Alexa will turn around and say, playing country hits from Spotify. Boom, away it goes. And what ends up happening is the Sonos system gets used less and less, and finally isn't used at all because voice control is just so much easier at that point. Now, one of the things that we found in the US is that there are other systems that are similar to this out there. Yamaha Music Cast, perfect example. but it's only about 31%, profit in that. Denon can be as high as 40 here in the US. Sonos is 25 to 30. And the Valet, depending on, again, what the margins are that you're going to take out there in the field here in the US, they get 50 points on the amplifier and they get 62 points on speakers. It's a much more profitable product to sell than to sell any of these competitors. So with all of that being the case, remember, as I said, you can use that individual zone out in an advanced system to be able to use additional amplification, a subwoofer. You may also want to hardwire additional Valet amplifiers together because you want the same global source, for example, to feed to the next amplifier. You can do that as well. Also, if you want to, you can stack, as I said, more zones with only the dot. You don't need any external wiring to connect the pieces. The dots themselves are what connect. You do have zone grouping so that you can set up multiple zones or multiple groups that you want to use. You may have the party mode that plays in every single zone. You may have a group 5 or a group family that only plays in 3 of the zones and doesn't play in the back end of the house because that's where the children are sleeping. However you'd like to do that, you have that as an option, and all of that takes place here. Now, the 12-volt trigger, as I said, we already have people that are using it with Control Savant and Crestron to be able to do a simple command based on the dot being activated. So that's already part of those systems. Now, again, it wasn't designed to replace any of these, not at all, but it certainly can complement them. So that's important. Now, the Echo Spot, which do you have the Echo Spot in Australia yet?
I have to double check that.
Okay.
Oh, yes, we do actually. Yes, Spot's here. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a small video device that allows you to be able to do video conferencing or calling. It allows you to be able to integrate it with a Ring doorbell so that you can see who's at the front door on the little device here. It's actually got a camera on it as well. We've already had these connected. Now you can't power these with the Valet because it actually needs hard power in the wall. But somebody sitting it next to their bed and plugging it into the wall, then using the Balun to take the output, send it to the speakers in the room, it now becomes your camera, your video display, and your streaming source, while the speakers in the room are actually giving you the output of this device. So we've got a lot of that going on right now. So what's the idea here? Well, we'd really like to be able to create the Jarvis experience from Iron Man. We want that feeling of walking into a room and asking for something and having the computer respond to us without any equipment being seen whatsoever. In a room like this, here are the loudspeakers up above. Here is the dot behind the speaker grill in the center, and you literally walk into the room and you say, Alexa, play Kenny Loggins, and boom, if you're my age, that's the kind of request you would make. And all of a sudden, I'm listening to Footloose because of the fact that I've walked in and asked the system to respond. I can tell you that the response from consumers has been overwhelmingly positive. I've had the opportunity to sit in a few model homes and demo the product as people have walked through, and literally their jaw drops. They're like, you're kidding, that's all I need to do to make this happen? It's absolutely incredible. So that would be the case. Now, of course, the Dot has over 10,000 what they call skills, which are apps that are available, and they're adding anywhere between 40 and 100 a week to this. I'm not trying to put you out of the RTI business, please, that's not the case. But there may be situations where a simple control for lights or a simple control for the thermostat may be something that someone wants in that room. We're not selling it as a control system, however, Amazon certainly is. So if you want to be able to use it to interface with any number of different products, it has that capability as well. So that's a rough overview of the entire system.